Levi.
Nearly 20% of children between ages 3 to 17 have a mental, emotional, developmental, or behavioral disorder.
Related use and neglect can lead to abnormal brain development.
I'm always getting in trouble. My parents think I'm a failure. I'm trying to do good things, but no one really cares. What is there to live for?
No one will care. Might as well take some of these bastards with me.
That's what I'm trying not to be.
Wake up. Wake up. Stop telling yourself this isn't happening. You are haunted, and you don't know what to do. Look at me. You can't hide from monsters in your mind. I'm never going away. I'm always here, waiting to take the wheel. Can't you sense it? That impending feeling of dread? The alarm's going out. You know it. But go ahead. Keep stuffing your face in scrolling distractions. No vice can hold you together. Keep telling yourself you're too busy to face your anxiety. That if you just work hard and keep your head down, the storm will pass. But your demons are wearing you down. Until the grind becomes so unbearable you feel cornered, possessed to weed out a threat to target your rage. Fight.
The gun violence are
These deadly mass shooting is just the latest.
And suddenly, it's too late. You've become the monster. No longer human in the eyes of who you were before you were inflicted. See, once upon a time you were this sweet child, but something opened the door to this spirit of destruction. That monster is so entangled in how you think, it's embedded in your very cells. You've got to do the work. Dig it out, one page at a time. But be careful how long you linger, because it could get buried there. Because the story isn't just about you. These demons were passed on by your family, your mom and dad. Trauma linking generations. Until the picture's so big, you can't hold it anymore. And you crumble under its weight. You've spent all these years stuck in the past, instead of letting it go and living your life. By the time you realize the monster's won, you'll be a ghost. Like me. The scariest thing you can do is sit down and face your monster. Take a good, hard look at mental illness and the role it plays in your life. There's a huge sense of shame in even questioning whether you may be faced with some degree of mental illness. It's seen in society maybe as a weakness, that there's something inferior about you. Really, a lot of people who live with some of these disorders are extraordinarily strong for putting one foot in front of the other and trying to keep their head above water with a disability that no one else can see, and therefore most people cannot empathize with or understand when some unusual behavior is triggered. It's a difficult place to be. It's haunting.
I can't tell the difference between what I see and what I remember. It all just feels the same. Like it's happening again and again.
Most people today know what PTSD is, but not everybody realizes that one of the leading causes of post-traumatic stress disorder is childhood adversity, trauma growing up. When a person goes through a traumatic experience again and again before they can get over the last, they can develop something called complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Somebody who develops CPTSD can get so accustomed to chaos and crisis in their life that sometimes the scariest thing is actually when everything's going okay, because it feels like at any moment it has the potential to go wrong, like it always has. And so a person can become sort of possessed with hypervigilance, looking for clues of the floor falling out, you know. They can become just so anxious and angry and have all these sort of misplaced emotions that can bleed over into their behavior. And if you don't know what's going on with that person, it can sometimes be a little alarming. It doesn't always look the way I've portrayed it here, of course, but for me, this is sometimes how it felt on the inside when I was at my worst.
How I think determines how I act. And that, buddy, seems to be the root of the problem.
So I remember this one time, after we premiered one of my films, I was on a local radio show in Anchorage, Alaska, and once the interview was over, they turned to me and they said, you know, one of our technicians here went to high school with you, and they told us that you were making super bloody films way back then. You know, she said, I didn't want to put you on the spot on air, but Levi, I wanted to ask you, why are all your films so violent? I hadn't really thought about it before. I instantly felt guarded, didn't know what to say. But she had a point. It sparked something in me. And I started taking a deeper look at my life and the kinds of things that were normalized growing up in Anchorage.
Have you ever seen a demon, Dad?
Demons are real. They're very, very real. And their job is to destroy you.
From a young age, and I'm talking about a really little kid, I had incredibly violent dreams. And I know my mother was very careful in what I was exposed to on television. And I'm talking about, 4 years old, 5 years old, the same dreams of violence of people I didn't know. I've always wondered where those would come from, especially at such a young age. Was it some sort of genetic memory in my DNA passed down from my dad?
I know the wicked person I am.
Was it something I witnessed growing up? Or was it something that the ghosts in our house were showing me?
They're very, very real.
I really always held on to that growing up of how bizarre it was that I would have almost what felt like memories when I was basically a toddler of these terrible incidents. Is that why it shows up in my work? I don't know. Is somebody with CPTSD more likely to be violent? I'm not a doctor, man. And, until recently, CPTSD wasn't even a thing. And in fact, it's not in the DSM yet. But clinicians are starting to recognize that there's a difference in how complex post-traumatic stress presents compared to somebody with just typical PTSD or other behavioral personality disorders. They're also beginning to recognize its prevalence in civilian life. In my generation, there's also been an uprising of violence in our country. And the blame is definitely on mental illness, but the focus is not on the cure, it's on the monster. So, do I think that CPTSD can make somebody more violent? I think that people who get deranged and act out on their intrusive, violent thoughts, I'm certain have faced trauma, especially growing up.
I did the best I could. Ain't my fault that I ended up this way, ain't.
so fuck you. I used to think to myself as a young lad, I'm afraid. I wish somebody would worry about me.
I'm sure that adverse childhood experiences play a big role in the mental health of people who are living with the kind of anxiety and anger that fuels some sort of need to find a target to act out and feel seen, because how else can someone feel seen if they're plagued with that kind of anger and pain?
Nobody ever worries about Don. You know how much that hurts? Yeah, okay, I admit it. I'm angry at him. I'm angry at me. And this you got to turn the tape off for. Nobody knows this, not my mother, not my siblings. Nobody's supposed to.
You know, where is there a safe place to talk about that? Not everyone has a good friend or a family member that they can trust to, confess those kind of secrets. You know, not everybody's going to get a self-help book. You know, most of us who are, just trying to be strong and put one foot in front of the other and go, fuck it, man. Life goes on. You just got to keep working hard. We're not normally going to be drawn to looking for that kind of self-help unless we really hit a rock bottom. When you're busy pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, you don't have time for all that. You don't want the slog of more research and more work. You want to be entertained. You want to escape. I didn't get diagnosed with complex PTSD until I was in my late 30s, and up until that point, I'd really worked myself into the ground, sort of living in denial of the level of stress and anxiety that really followed me everywhere I went, because I wanted to be strong, I wanted to be competent, and I didn't want to let anyone down.
Oh no, I don't want to go to hell!
I grew up in the world of performing arts, and of course I had no idea that performing arts can be one of the most therapeutic activities for somebody suffering PTSD. Performing arts and writing and filmmaking kind of gave me tools to look at life through a filter where even the hard things that were happening were kind of base material for the story I was going to tell someday.
This is just an experiment for a movie I've been making. You'll see in a little while.
I think when you're a kid, especially when you feel alone and lost, that's the one thing you want, is to feel seen and accepted.
I'm just finding out now that Levi and I are working together on this project. I'm finding out things that his dad exposed him to that I had no idea. And it's like I would have definitely put a stop to it.
There were a lot of things, I didn't dare talk about when I was a kid. Some of it to protect my dad, and some of it because it sounded so crazy. There was a fucking ghost in my house. My dad believed in that kind of stuff.
To answer your question, yeah, demons are real. They're very, very real. And their job is to destroy you.
I grew up believing that I was haunted. For the first 25 years of my life, I really thought I was cursed, that the things I was experiencing were due to some insidious external entity that was haunting my life. And it was terrifying. That was incredibly anxiety-provoking. From the time I remember, the house I grew up in felt haunted.
Yeah, there was something, it sounds strange, but something kind of odd in that house from the time we moved in. And other people heard it, we heard it, and it was like, whoa, what is that? That's weird.
You never really felt alone, and you'd hear strange sounds throughout the house.
There were sounds, and there were sometimes doors that were locked. To me, it would be like just seeing something out of the corner of my eye. I mean, I would just feel like this cold just going by me. And if you've never experienced that, it probably sounds crazy, but I think a lot of people really have, and just like kind of a presence. I mean, I had gotten really afraid a few times because I thought someone was in the house. And once I called the police.
Hello?
From the earliest memories I have, I held on to it because it was just so hard to explain where these things were coming from. So for the first several years of my life, I remember having the hardest time sleeping. I'd have night terrors almost on a nightly basis, several times a week at least. And even scarier is that sometimes when I'd have these dreams, I would just know that I was going to wake up and there was going to be something in the room with me. I've read about sleep paralysis and sleep paralysis demons where someone is sort of stuck between dream state and awake, and they can't move their body. They're paralyzed because their brain isn't all the way awake, and they hallucinate figures in the room with them. And I experienced that from the earliest I can remember. And I know most kids are afraid of the dark, but I distinctly remember waking up and seeing the figure of a man, I guess, in my window. And then I remember it being in my room and being powerless and just laying there frozen as I could hear it walk toward me. Walk on pieces of paper I had colored on the floor, or through little piles of Legos left scattered around. And I remember it sitting on the edge of my bed. I remember it's like a sensation of the blankets and the weight. And I know how it might kind of sound to somebody who's psychoanalyzing it, and I've thought about it a lot, about repressed memories that happened at bedtime. A lot of these happened when there was not a man living in the house. When I was quite young, my parents divorced, and I was raised by my mom as a single mom before she remarried when I was 8 or 9 years old. Well, these dreams continued during that time, but they started before any man was living there. I remember being lifted out of my bed and held, and not being touched in any kind of sexual or intrusive way, but held the way you would hold a baby when I was too big for my mom to hold me. I was a big kid and far too large for my mom to carry at that point. She had a bad back from a car accident that we were in. But it just held me lovingly. And I just remember being scared to death, so scared that I knew just don't open your eyes all the way, just keep breathing slow, pretend you're asleep, and I'd just black out. Those kind of memories are very vivid in my mind, and they've scared me for a long time. That kind of activity sort of tapered off as I got a little older, but in time, when I started having friends sleep over in elementary school and things like that, it started up again.
And then suddenly there was something that was scary. I was really convinced there was another presence in that house.
By the time I was a teenager, sometimes I'd have people over, sometimes I'd be alone. It would just come out of the blue, and it got so bad it would just pound on my wall.
Holy shit! What the fuck? Fuck!
I mean, it would just send you through the roof. I mean, you'd just be running out of there. These pounding explosions with no explanation, just going around the room. Bam! 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 It was terrifying.
Loud noises. Not like these, I wasn't expecting it, and it was like, whoa, this is like really scary. I think that there's something going on here. But I didn't want to tell Levi because I didn't want to scare him. This would be kind of a theme in our relationships. He had been experiencing some very strange things in the house too. He didn't want to scare me.
Was some of that anxiety and hypervigilance that came along with wondering when that that feeling of being watched would start and when the activity would start again, was that potentially symptomatic of having CPTSD or PTSD? Maybe, maybe some of it was. Wouldn't the impacts of living through this sort of unexplained terror also contribute to CPTSD? Most certainly. It's taken a long time to get comfortable to open up talking about what it means to have CPTSD and its influence on my story and the perceptions I've had in my life. I don't think there's anything shameful of accepting that, you may have struggled with some mental illness. We've all been sick or injured before, and the mind is a part of the body just like anything else, and it can happen to anyone. It's important to be able to have these conversations so people can have sort of permission to open up or allow themselves to look at that and maybe recognize some patterns that don't serve them, and ask themselves if they want to really sit down and face that and try to make a change.
Y2K.
I don't know if my generation experienced more collective trauma than most, or if we just had a bigger window to witness the world's dangers since we were exposed to TV from the get-go. Internet by the time we were in high school, and soon an algorithm that feeds what we watch into our phones. Regardless, we've lived through some crazy times over the last 40 years, and for those of us who were also navigating a lot of adversity growing up, those stressors might have hit a little harder than most. What a grim window to the world we've been watching. What kind of vision of the future can youth today look forward to? Is it any wonder people are mad? Is it any wonder they're breaking? What impact does it have on kids of adversity who already have a hard enough time keeping a glimmer of hope alive? And we're seeing more and more of these people breaking down than we have in decades, in generations. People who have survived prolonged trauma and grief typically either disassociate from reality or else they hyperfixate on any impending signal or clue of danger. When someone is pushed psychologically into a fight or flight response, if they feel like it's impossible to run away and remove themselves from their distress, it might become a necessity to try to find a target to fight. And for them, it'll feel like life and death. And these days, when you have an algorithm feeding you the things you want to hear, someone can hyperfixate even more on some sort of perceived danger and create a target in their head. If they feel like they can't run away and remove themselves from the situation that's causing them distress, they might convince themselves that they need to find a target to fight. Those are some of the struggles I reflected on when writing The Midnight Sun. Going through all this media, I've realized how close I came to giving into that anger at times. And I've come to question why.
If a teen never faces their problem, they'll detach themselves. Some might commit suicide, but most won't, especially the ones that already feel like no one cares about them. They often think, if I die, nobody will remember me, no one will care. Often a teen in this situation will fantasize about hurting others, the people he hates. They feel like life's not worth living, and if I'm gonna die anyway, I might as well take some of these bastards with me.
I feel like something inside me has died. Like humanity, like pity, I don't know. I feel like if I ever get in a situation like that again, I'm just gonna totally go insane. But I hate and hurt someone.
What was it that sort of deterred me from giving into those demons? I want to explore that on this podcast. If you're a fan of the horror genre, then you know that a key rule to any haunting is that ignoring it always makes it worse. Living in denial amplifies the problem every single time. I think it's the perfect metaphor for mental illness because it usually works the same way. So the key to finding help is to start talking about it. In future episodes, I'd like to share some excerpts from my book and invite on guests, other people who have CPTSD or someone who survived a haunting, both clinicians and paranormal investigators. And and hope it sparks, an interesting journey into the discussion of living with complex PTSD or other, psychological mental disorders. And I also want to talk about what it's like to be haunted, because chances are, if you've ever lived with a monster in your house, you probably have a little PTSD yourself, and maybe this podcast's for you.